Hello everyone, this is the 1906 video. Dimitri has a warm day in April and I have a cold day in August. So I know what he would say about that. Oi, devil take it. And that's my sentiment exactly. It's supposed to get even cooler later in the week. But you didn't come here for a weather report. I'm sorry to say, and I beg your pardon for the fact that I am not going to make it to the library to do the diary digitization today for the cocoa material. Various things have come up, but I have an absolutely clear day tomorrow, so this is the last time that I will kick that can down the road. All right, I came across an interesting book that I barely started once and I want to return to, and you may wonder why I am showing this to you. It's called Famine in Russia, 1891 to 1892. It's a scholarly work from Columbia University Press, and it's by Richard G. Robbins Jr., and the subtitle is The Imperial Government Responds to a Crisis. So I guess the tip-off for why this book is of interest in relation to Dimitri is the date, 1891. And so there was famine in Russia that year, horrible famine, and thousands of people died, if I have the number correctly. And it was in the vicinity, in the countryside around Moscow and in other places. So in the vicinity where Dimitri was born. So that's something that provides some additional context to what was going on at the time that this little Grand Duke came into the world. And he wasn't, I think, important enough for it to attach to him as a sign of ill omen or bad luck, because, if it had been a Tsarevich, then probably, yes, everything was taken into account. And with Nicholas, for instance, that he was born on the feast day of the patriarch Job on the Orthodox calendar. But in Dimitri's case, of course, it was not, the link was never made unless it was with maybe local people. And so, have you been on pins and needles waiting to find out whether Dimitri did well or flubbed his big day, his big parade in leading the 2nd Guards Rifle Battalion? I wasn't, of course, because I knew in advance what happened. And so we will find out in this diary entry, although we're skipping, as very often is the case, from the Sunday, 16th April, we're skipping the day of the big event, which was Monday, 17th April, and going right to the 18th. But don't worry, that is the main topic of the diary entry on the 18th, and for obvious reasons, he was too busy to write on the 17th. So let's dive in. And his first line is something that we'll talk about, and something that always goes along with the sign of the cross, always. So, and he has included the sign of the cross in the actual text, and perhaps he even stopped to do it as he was writing, and so I will do it as well. So here's the diary entry for 18 April 1906. I have to take my hat off. Glory to thee, O God, glory to thee, O God, glory to thee, O God. That's what he writes. Okay, I did very well, and even Uncle Nicolasha praised me. I want to go to bed so bad. It's better to write tomorrow. Today was the first rifle training, and tomorrow Uncle Nicky is taking me with him to the battalion supper. I'm so frightfully happy. The sovereign has appointed Del Sal a Flegel adjutant. I'm frightfully happy. I like him awfully. It's so warm that my window is open and I can't even feel it. Maria is still sulking and upset with GM 9:30, and then we'll go right on to the 2-line diary entry for 19th April, Wednesday. I just got back from the battalion. There was a supper. It was great fun. 12:15 p.m. Or I'm sorry, 12:15 a.m. Okay, so I guess I overstated that. So there's not an actual description of the parade, but Dimitri's focus is that he did well. And so he's so happy about that. And he told us that he was praying hard on the 16th that he that he would do well. So here is his mark of gratitude to God. And as I say, you find this in every single liturgy. And it is a time when everybody crosses themselves, and it's sort of one of the foundational prayers that he would have been constantly exposed to. So, and it's actually something that I do every night before I go to bed. All right, so our little guy knocked it out of the park. He nailed it. And so much so that Uncle Nicolasha praised him, and that was high praise indeed. We know from the previous diary entries that he was particularly concerned about doing this in front of the emperor, his sovereign, but he also is just thrilled to death that Uncle Nicolasha praised him, and I'm sure for a number of reasons. I mean, he didn't know Uncle Nicolasha well. They weren't close. It wasn't like Uncle Nicky. And Nicolasha was also a giant. He was almost 7 feet tall in the sort of mold of Peter the Great, and he was also a very serious figure. His job as commander of the Guards in St. Petersburg Guards in St. Petersburg Military District, the most important military job in Imperial Russia before the war broke out, that was a serious job. It was not a sinecure. He was a graduate of the General Staff Academy. His father had been a military reformer, and he followed in his father's footstep as a military reformer, and he took his job very seriously. He would become the commander-in-chief of the Russian forces during the First World War before the emperor pushed him out of that role disastrously. So this was high praise for Dimitri. He really pulled it off. And now it's only 9:30, but he's so exhausted from all of this, from the events of the 17th and 18th, that he just wants to go right to bed. So he says he's going to give us our description on the 19th, but on the 19th he doesn't end up doing that. Ah, well, he's 14. So he had some rifle training that day, and the commander of the brigade, Del Sal, the Tsar has shown a mark of great favor to the battalion and to the man himself and to Dimitri by appointing him a Flügel adjutant, so appointing him a member of the suite. So I was able to find out a little bit about Del Sal. Pyotr Alexeyevich was his name. He was 45 years old at this time, and he has a Wikipedia entry in Russian which says that he was born in Yugoslavia, and that is somewhat of an absurdity because, of course, Yugoslavia didn't exist until after the First World War, so he was born in one of the countries that make up or that made up Yugoslavia, which also no longer exists now, of course. So we don't know which of those countries. His name isn't really a giveaway. Pyotr Alexeyevich is very Russian. Del Sal is, of course, neither Russian nor, pertaining to any of the countries that made up Yugoslavia. What is it? Spanish, Portuguese, one or the other, I guess. And he would get out of Russia at the time of the revolution, and he would settle in what was then genuinely Yugoslavia. We don't know where, but Dmitri likes him and is so happy that he's honored by being made a Flegel adjutant, which also means that Dmitri will be seeing him in that capacity because he'll be doing his rotation in Tsarskaya Selo with the Tsar. Okay, so now the other big news is, beside the fact that Maria is still ticked off with lambing and that it's unseasonably warm, is that Dmitri is going to be going with Nicholas to the battalion supper. And why is that particularly important? Well, we know about the regimental dinners that occur on regimental feast days and that are attended by members of the imperial family, not just men, but women, and the ones that Dmitri has been excluded from for quite a while and finally was allowed to go to one. But this is something completely different. This is an all-male affair in the officers' mess of the battalion, and it's late at night, and there will be typically lots of drinking going on, and so it's not really an environment for a child, but you know, Dmitri has had his big day. He's done extremely well, and Uncle Nicky is going to take him to this supper. So for once, he gets to do something or go somewhere where Maria would never be included or invited. So this is something for men, and he's, he's going to be included. So he really is growing up, or at least that's being acknowledged that he's growing up, and that he himself will be entering the military service in a guards regiment in the Horse Guards, and now he's beginning to be genuinely immersed in that environment. So he writes his, I don't know what he was doing all day on Wednesday that he didn't have time to write, but he writes when he gets back from the supper at 12:15, and obviously he had a really good time. There were rumors current among the public at that time that Nicholas was constantly going to these regimental suppers and getting completely drunk, and that he might even be an alcoholic. And that may be just something that was by association with his father. I mean, his father was, from everything I've read, Alexander III was an alcoholic and would get pretty plastered, to use a vulgar word, at these affairs. Nicholas was going to these dinners constantly, but his Flegel adjutant Fabritsky, who wrote memoirs, said, honestly, he did not. He was not. He was careful with how much he drank, and he didn't get drunk. So I will take Fabritsky's word for that. He strikes me as particularly honest in his memoirs. He presents the good with the bad for the most part, although he practically worshipped Nicholas. Okay, so anyway, that was an aside, and what I really wanted to talk about in relation to today's diary entries, and the reason why I didn't go on to the next diary entry, even though these two are so short, is returning to the subject that I brought up a while ago about whether some of the tension that would exist, especially in later years, between Dmitri and Alexandra was perhaps rooted in her discomfort with him becoming sort of a surrogate son to Nicholas, whose own son, because of his illness, had he couldn't so much be a buddy to his father in the sense of doing normal father-son outdoor physical activities. And there was also the expectation that he was not going to live long, that he'd be lucky to make it into adolescence and really lucky to make it to adulthood. So in the series I've been doing called the Romanov Dynasty in Russia, in the next installment I'm going to talk a little bit about the succession in Russia, in Muscovite Russia, and later even under Peter the Great in Imperial Russia, where there was no legal mandate for the eldest son of the sovereign to inherit and to become the next sovereign. That there was simply no rule. There was tradition, but the autocrat could essentially make his own rules. And so, it was up to him. And that was the case, I gather, earlier on, probably around the same time in other dynasties as well, because I've just been reading a book about France and Louis le Gros, Louis the Obese, or Louis the Fat, I think he was called, and how he brought his eldest son, started giving his eldest son royal tasks to carry out, where he was very sort of explicitly showcased not only as the heir to the throne, but almost a kind of joint ruler, even though he was only, what was he, 14 or 15 when he died, and Louis started doing this when he was about 13, and the same was true in Muscovite Russia with the first Russian Tsar, Mikhail I. What he did with his son was not declare him the heir, but start bringing him into official royal tasks where he was associated with his father very clearly in public as being the heir to the throne, not through official designation, but just through the proximity and the roles that he was being given by his father, the Tsar. And so there was a tradition of this. I think it also existed in Imperial Rome. I think that this was also the way the Roman emperors, who likewise did not have a law saying that, in fact, they weren't supposed to be hereditary rulers, so they didn't have a succession law, and so they would show their favor in very public ways and associate the chosen heir with them in very public ways, and give the chosen heir tasks that would be a demonstration of his being considered the heir. And so this was not what Nicholas was doing. Obviously, Nicholas wanted his son to succeed him, but there was still a little bit of that because of the fact that Alexei was basically terminally ill in that day and age, before clotting factor could be given to hemophiliacs when they had a crisis. So Dmitri wasn't the next in line to the throne. If Alexei had died, the next in line to the throne would have been Nicholas's younger brother, Mikhail. But these great marks of favor were being shown to Dmitri, and this close association with the emperor. And if that made people uncomfortable within the family, and particularly Alexandra, it's understandable. And indeed, there was dissension within the family in 1905 when Nicholas gave this honorary commandership to Dmitri. And it wasn't the case with other young Grand Dukes when they had been Dmitri's age, that they were given things like this. You know, they had these honorary commander positions, but this sort of thing where it was a guards unit in Tsarskaya Selo and where they were leading parades in front of the emperor and that sort of thing, no, absolutely not. So this was quite a mark of favor to Dmitri. And of course, in an autocracy where you have literally one person who's the ruler, any person who has privileged access to the ruler is a person who is important and consequential. that the whole basis of how you got things done, if you wanted to do reforms, if you wanted to do anything, you had to have the approval of the emperor, and therefore the closer contact you had with the emperor, and the more you were in his favor, and the more on intimate terms you were with him, the more powerful you were. Ostensibly, if you fell out of favor, then you would lose that. So this was, it was significant. And my instinct is that probably Nicholas was doing this because he was fond of Dmitri, and because he understood how difficult things were with Dmitri, with his father having been banished, and with his uncle who was taking care of him, having been killed, and not having a real family. And maybe, who knows, Nicholas even felt a little guilty about banishing Dmitri's father and depriving him of his father, and stripping Paul of custody, and basically turning Dmitri and Maria into orphans. That was his decision as the emperor. So anyway, that was a bit long-winded with me, but I like as much as possible to give you some extra context that wouldn't necessarily, I mean, some of you are experts, so you would get these things, but for someone just sort of sitting down and reading the diary entries, they wouldn't necessarily get the broader context, and I guess that's one of my justifications for doing these videos. So anyway, thank you for watching as always, and I hope to see you next time. Bye.